God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
All right, please be seated. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor Schneiderman,
Present.
Councilwoman Lofstad,
Here.
Councilman Martell,
Here.
Councilman Bouvier,
Here.
Councilman Schiavone.
Present.
All right, so what I'd like to do first today is to go over the draft agenda for the December 8th, 2020 meeting. It'll occur at 1 o'clock on December 8th. We're going to meet remote via Zoom and make provisions for the public to be able to view and participate. So let's see, everybody should have a copy of the draft agenda. There are 8 public hearings. The first one is on the acquisition of lands of Edwards, Bridgehampton, amending the CPF plan. Second one is on the acquisition of lands of the estate of Vivian Culver in West Hampton. Third one is to consider amending Town Code Chapter 23 Ethics to address composition of the Ethics Board and particular land use boards. The fourth is a public hearing to consider amending Town Code Chapter 205 Waste Management to amend and add definitions, amend regulations, address waste management in commercial properties, and require a permit or single entry pass for residential self-haulers at Southampton Town transfer stations. Fifth is a public hearing to consider amending Town Code Chapter 325 Wetlands to authorize the extension of conditional wetland permit approvals and wetland permits and waive any applicable extension fees due to COVID-19. The sixth is a public hearing to consider amending Town Code Chapter 330 zoning, Section 183 site plan elements to address rainstorm retention and require recycling containers on site plans within the town. Seventh is a public hearing to consider amending various sections of the town code in connection with the regulation of battery energy storage systems within town. And the eighth is a public hearing to consider enacting Article 10.1 of the Southampton Town Code, Chapter 330, to authorize agricultural conservation districts within the town, formerly known as agricultural planned development districts. All right, any questions on any of the public hearings? Great. All right, let's move on to resolutions. First one is 35-280, appoints Epic EPIC insurance brokers and consultants as insurance broker for the town. 35-27-277, and interrupt me if you have any questions. 35-277 authorizes the rental of equipment from the Suffolk County contract for construction equipment and dredging services with Chesterfield Associates. Rick, you've got the next one.
Number 35-322, authorize the supervisor to execute a 2021 Park District grant agreement with the Hampton Bays Historical Society. ID number 35321, authorize the supervisor to execute a 2021 Park District grant with Hampton Bays Beautification Association for the maintenance and upkeep of the Main Street Business District. ID number 35317, authorize the supervisor to execute a 2021 Park District grant with the Watermill Village Improvement Association for the beautification and cultural development of the Watermill Hamlet Center. Town Board ID number 35319, authorize the supervisor to execute a 2021 Park District grant with Watermill Community Club for the beautification and cultural development of the Watermill Community Club. ID number 35318, authorize the supervisor to execute a 2021 Park District grant with Watermill Museum for the maintenance and upkeep of the Watermill Museum. Number 35320, authorize the supervisor to execute a 2021 Parking District grant with Hampton Bays Beautification Association for the maintenance and upkeep of the Main Street Business District and public parking access.
All right, 35-197 authorizes the supervisor to execute a 2021 service agreement with Motorola Solutions for the radio systems, tower, and communication at the town's police department. 35-278 authorizes the supervisor to execute a contract extension and amendment with First Coastal Corporation for professional consulting services for the North Sea Beach Colony Erosion Control District.
ID number 35284 authorizes the supervisor to execute an amendment to the 2020 consulting contract with Pace Analytical Services to provide water analysis services to the Hampton Bays Water District.
ID number 35323 authorizes the supervisor to sign a 2021 Bridgehampton Park District grant agreement with the Bridgehampton Museum.
ID number 35283 authorizes the supervisor to sign a contract with Train Building Services, Train US Incorporated, for heating system at Nathaniel Rogers House.
35-282 authorizes the town controller to purchase the necessary property casualty auto liability insurance policies. 35-281 authorizes the town controller to purchase the necessary workers' compensation insurance policy from New York State Municipal Workers' Compensation Alliance.
Number 35252, recall and amend Town Board Resolution 2020-964 to sign contract with Arias Design LAPC for an amended architectural, landscape, and engineering conceptual park design plan for Shinnecock Canal Maritime Park.
ID 3516, this is notice to bidders for Bay Avenue bulkhead replacement.
ID number 35312, 2020 notice to bidders for Flying Point Beach Comfort Station renovation.
John, you're next.
Board Resolution ID 35314 is a 2020 notice to bidders for landscaping services at various town locations. Town Board Resolution ID 35 and co-sponsored with Councilman Scavone. It's a 2020 notice to bidders for farming opportunities, Town Line Road, Parcel Town Line Road, Sagaponic, Suffolk County Tax Map 908-4-1-27.
35-279 amends the 2020 through 2024 capital budget for surveillance cameras. 35-238 deposits money into escrow account for professional services in connection with the site plan application, Hampton Business District Phase 5, 245 Roger Way. 35-211, resolution of adoption amending Town Code Chapter 325 wetlands to authorize the extension of conditional wetlands approvals and wetlands permits and waives any applicable extension fees due to COVID-19. That's the subject of that hearing earlier that day. 35-287, bond authorization $50,000 for acquisition of mule type utility vehicle. 35-291, bond authorization of $50,000 for heavy equipment emergency vehicle. 35-292, bond authorization of $120,000 for purchase of radios and emergency response equipment for fire marshal's office and other departments. 35-293, bond authorization of $150,000 for comprehensive plan action item. 35-289, bond authorization of $150,000 for boat engines for Bay Constable patrol boats. 35-288, bond authorization of $270,000 for various information technology projects. 35-290, bond resolution of $300,000 for professional planning and design services for various town-owned facilities, including the Jackson Avenue campus. 35-309, bond authorization $42,000 for construction of waste management attendance booths. 35-301, bond authorization $55,000 for construction of parking lot and reconstruction of the Bay Building.
May I ask a question? What's the Bay Building?
That's a good question. Does anybody know which building this is?
Which reso is that? I'm sorry, it wasn't.
I was just listening, but
There's 55,000 bond for construction of the Bay Building.
Page 55 on the agenda, Len.
Yeah, hold on a sec. Can you skip it and let me get back to you, and I'll get back to you?
Thanks, that's fine.
Okay, 35302, bond authorization, 100,000 for townwide bridge reconstruction. 35304, bond authorization of 100,000 for bulkheads. 35305, bond authorization of 100,000 for townwide culverts. 35297, bond authorization of 110,000 for improvements to the Shinnecock Canal Maritime Park. 35308, bond authorization of 100,000 for sidewalks. 35311, bond authorization of 130,000 for waste management equipment. 35295, bond authorization of 200,000 for reconstruction of various town docks. 35306, bond authorization of 200,000 for townwide drainage. 35310, bond authorization of 300,000 for improvements to the town's waste yard facility. I hope I didn't skip one. 35298, is that the next one?
294,
24.
It's good.
Page
page
90.
90.
Julie, what was that reso number again? I'm sorry.
35301.
Okay, we're running up. Okay.
All right, 35294, bond resolution of 350,000 for construction of new heated garage and storage facility for the police department. 35298, bond authorization of 380,000 for improvements to various parks, playgrounds, or recreational facilities. 35299, bond authorization of 400,000 for improvements to the North Sea landfill compost facility, including leachate reduction. 35303, bond authorization of 500,000 for highway equipment. 35300, bond authorization of 720,000 for improvements to various town-owned buildings. 35296, bond authorization of 750,000 for improvements to Shinnecock commercial dock and dock facilities. 35307, bond authorization of 2,200,000 for townwide road improvements.
Town Board Resolution 35232, waive in-water winter storage fees at Conscience Point Marina for Sea Scouts.
Before we move on, just Len, if you're there. Do we normally do these bonds at the end of the year, and are they all in the capital program?
Yes, they were all in the capital program. I wanted to get them all adopted sooner so that the permissive referendum would be done. Because I'm thinking I want to get these, the bond sale issued early. Because I'm worried about interest rates going up because they're starting to creep up as we speak.
So these are the bonds that we normally would do in like March, April next year.
Yeah, and I'm hoping if I can get this all done, that we'll go out in January sometime. I'm up against some deadlines, so I'm trying to get it done soon.
Right.
To take advantage of the historically low bond rates.
Correct. The one on Bay Avenue, that reso is for bidders to authorize the bidding on Bay Avenue?
No, it
it's
says
for
bond
construction of a building.
authorization.
For like a
We're losing
parking
you,
lot.
Len, I can't hear you.
Hold on.
All right, let Len go find out about that building, and we'll just keep on going. So where are we? Julie, you just read one.
That town board resolution ID 35253, release performance bond in connection with subdivision approval of the estates at Remsenburg.
ID number 35286. These are the approval of the 2020 junkyard permits.
Hey, Tommy John, I don't know if you know the answer on this. I mean, we just do this routinely. I'm always amazed when I look at the aerials of these places. There's just so many cars, and a lot of them are in recharge areas where we're concerned about drinking water. And I'm sure they're subject to county health department and DEC regulations, but it always seems like these junkyards are potential sources of contamination if these cars corrode and fluids leak out. I'm just kind of curious as to what protections are in place and what inspections occur. Because obviously every year we reapprove junkyard permits.
Right, and this resolution comes through the fire marshal's office after their inspection of the premises. I agree with you, Supervisor, and looking at some of the sites myself. So we could take a closer look at this. I'd be willing to pull this resolution and.
Oh, no. I mean, it's routine. I'm just kind of bringing up the issue. I mean, I know we need places, obviously, to store wrecked cars, but.
And other, looking at the aerials, and I've done this. There's a lot of junk on these yards.
I just want to make sure that the fluids aren't leaking into the aquifer. I just don't know who inspects that kind of thing.
My office
Well,
did receive a couple of
there is a
complaints on one of
requirement
these
for
locations.
junkyards, for particularly storing cars and vehicles, that they're. I'm sorry?
I said,
I'm having a lot of trouble hearing you guys.
There's 12 of these things, and some of them are massive. But anyway, Sunday, you were going to say something?
I said I did receive a couple of complaints on one of these particular locations with photographs and such that I did send on to code enforcement, and I know they did respond a couple of times. Not sure what the ultimate outcome was.
Okay. And John, did you finish saying what you were saying?
I think so. We can move on.
All right, Tommy John, you're next here.
ID number 35285, and this is the approval of 2020 manufactured home community licenses.
35233 amends town workplace wellness program. 35237 accepts resignation of a sanitation helper in waste management. 35227 appoints Brittany Benton to sanitation helper position in municipal works, waste management. 35228 appoints Jeremy Smith to sanitation helper position in municipal works, waste management division. 35242 appoints Paul Jones to senior cook position in senior services. 35002 authorizes acquisition of lands of Devonshire Associates LLC, estate of Florence S. Kin, and Far Pond Investments LLC, Shinnecock Hills, and amends the CPF management and stewardship plan to include that property. And I think we've held the hearing on that one, if I recall. So I guess that would be eligible for a vote. 34755 authorizes acquisition of lands of Riser Trust, Noyak, amending the CPF management and stewardship plan to include that property. That also we held a hearing on. All right, and then there was some add-ons.
Have the information you needed on that other reso.
Okay, perfect. You want to give it to us?
Yeah, where that resolution is providing funding for us to subdivide the garage at the Hampton Bays Water District so we can store the emergency response vehicle that we should be receiving soon.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, yeah, that is helpful.
So I was thinking bay is in water, but it's bay is in a big building.
Yeah.
All right. Let's do the add-ons. Rick, yours is the first.
You're muted, Rick.
All right. Number 35324, amend Town Board Resolution 2020-807, which authorized the Justice Court to apply for grant funding to support Justice Court operations.
35327, authorize supervisor to sign any and all agreements for award of Community Preservation Fund water quality improvement project funds. And you're all co-sponsoring that one. 35328, authorizes the supervisor to sign any and all documents related to an agreement with Telview Corporation to purchase and install broadcast equipment and software for Southampton Channel 20. That's the community access channel. All right. That's all we have. Any questions on the agenda? Are we okay to have Sunday publish it? Sounds like it.
Right.
All right. Go ahead, Sunday.
Thank you very much.
So I got Ryan on, and COVID-19 continues to stay front and center on the agenda and in the news as we see the numbers going up. I know the town's aware that I ordered the workforce to be reduced to basically 50% where possible in co-working environments, and that's something we're likely going to continue. That would have expired this Friday, but I've been working with Ryan on making some modifications to it, but continuing it. That's been in place for, I think, 2 weeks now. And Ryan's reached out to all of the department heads to see how they're managing to keep up with their workload in the work from home type of setting. But Ryan, I know you've been very involved with all of this and more. So let me kick it to you as our COVID coordinator, and if you can bring us up to date, that would be great.
Sure, not a problem. Thanks, Supervisor. Yes, as you indicated, since last Monday, we have been in a reduced in-person staffing mode here at the town to try and minimize some of the physical presence of individuals in our buildings wherever possible. Obviously, certain departments and divisions have work that needs to be done, or roles that don't necessarily allow for that type of a reduction to occur, particularly, public safety and roadway maintenance and things like that, we really just kind of have to remain at 100% or at least elevated over the 50% range. We have reached out to all the department heads. Yesterday, the team, myself, Len, Frank, and Sandra have been just discussing this topic, and we reached out to all the department heads yesterday and got a feel for people's abilities to stay at this reduced in-person level. And by and large, the indications were that was something that they wished to proceed forward with. There were some departments that indicated that they wish to either increase above the 50% mark in order to be able to continue to successfully deliver services to our residents. So in the discussion that you and I had, I think the recommendation, going forward is to kind of continue at the track that we're at right now, but to allow for some discretion by individual department heads to increase or decrease their number, hopefully not going below the 50% mark, but to be able to have some flexibility to increase the number as necessary while still preserving employee safety, but to continue to deliver services to our residents. So as long as that could be done in a safe way in the spaces that we're occupying. Outside of the staffing efforts, happy to report that based on the most recent numbers that I have been provided by the state, it appears that some of our efforts earlier this week, the numbers were provided, and it appears that some of our efforts in the Hampton Bays yellow zone area, which we all know is more than just Hampton Bays. It goes a little bit east and a little bit west of that, as well as the Riverhead yellow zone, which we know is not specifically isolated to Riverhead town and encompasses some of the territory of the town of Southampton up in the Riverside, Northampton, Flanders area. happy to report that those numbers appeared to be going down as of earlier this week based on the state's data that they sent to us. The percent positive out of the tested population was going down. They were still higher than what we'd like them to be. They were still higher than what they were, a month and a half ago, but it was down from when we were originally classified into those areas. That's good to hear because it's indicating that hopefully some of our outreach and efforts in those areas is successful. Testing numbers are definitely up, so we know that testing in those areas has been successful. The Red Creek Park testing site that is being run as a coordinated effort between the town and Southampton Hospital, to my count at this point, has tested somewhere in the range of about 400 or so individuals at that testing site in the 5 days that it's been up and running. It's still open on Mondays and Wednesdays from 9 to 4, and it was open for one Friday in there for the initial date that we spun that testing site up. Yesterday there were 91 tests conducted at the Red Creek site. So people are taking advantage of that site. We've worked to get some basic heating into the tent area for the hospital workers that are there. Although, we're trying to keep, or they are trying to keep the sides, two sides of the tent open for good airflow to minimize possible exposures to their own staff. So the heat's constantly leaving the tent. So just so anybody that goes to that site's aware, if you have to get out of your car and have the swab done, it might be cold for 2 seconds and then you can get right back into your vehicle. So it's not too burdensome on any of the folks that are there. We've also worked with Hampton Bays School District, and we've pushed out, thanks to the help of Lois Clemenson and the district, we have either pushed out or are in the process of pushing out about 10,000 masks to the folks in that area. The district is sending some home with the student population and has also helped to get some of the masks as well as sanitizer into the hands of the food pantry, as well as the library. And we did a drop off of an additional batch of about 500 masks and a couple of hundred bottles of sanitizer to Sister Moore over at St. Rosalie's to push out to some of her congregants in the community as well. So there's a pretty substantial effort to put reusable masks and sanitizer into the hands of a lot of the folks that are in the area that has fallen into the yellow zone status. So between testing, public information going out, masks going out for distribution, and sanitizer, we hope that all of those combined efforts are going to lead to us hopefully exiting that status sooner than later, and enhancing the community safety there. Other than that, I would say generally, if anybody's been paying attention to the numbers, we're seeing a trend that's not surprising. It's disappointing, but it's not surprising based on what we saw from Halloween county-wide on or about November 6th and 7th, about a week after Halloween. We saw numbers starting to go up. That's when we saw a spike, and they've held up since then. They were a little bit higher on the 6th and 7th and kind of fell off, but they never went back to the pre-Halloween numbers. Right now, we're seeing right after Thanksgiving, 5, 6, 7 days following the holiday, people gathered. Countywide, they're seeing the percent positive numbers going up yet again. Being that they never went back down to pre-Halloween numbers and stayed elevated, we're seeing that percent positive up over 5%. And those numbers are much higher than what we had, just a month ago, a month and a half ago. So hospitalization rates are also up. We're seeing, unfortunately, some death numbers coming back to the county. We had a good run countywide for a while there where no one was dying from COVID-19. But unfortunately, the positivity numbers are up. The hospital numbers are up. We're seeing some level of people ending up in ICU and intubated again. And we've seen a small number of deaths associated with COVID-19 again springing back up. So we have to remain vigilant and take the appropriate efforts to try and stop the spread And with more holidays coming up, I think we need to continue to make sure that we're getting the message out to people that as much as it might be inconvenient and unhappy to do so, they should try and minimize any kind of gatherings as best as possible as we continue forward over the next month.
I can add a little to the numbers, so it's challenging. Some numbers I just can't seem to get. Like I don't seem to get on a hamlet basis, like for Hampton Bays, what percentage of those being tested are testing positive, which would be helpful to really get a sense of whether we're heading out of the yellow zone. I hope that we are. You know, I do go to the county's webpage, and they do a daily report for the county, and then they do a breakdown for each town, and then community by community. The numbers don't always match, and I've been tracking this for months. So just for example, so yesterday's numbers, which reflect the day before, the town of Southampton had 31 new cases. Riverhead had 35 new cases. Islip had 310. Brookhaven 323. East Hampton had 14 new cases. It's less than Southampton, but the population's also a third of ours. And then I look at the, you know, some of the communities and sort of try to break it down. So the 1 day change in Riverside yesterday was 1 new case, in Northampton 1, Flanders 2. West Hampton had 9 new cases. Hampton Bays had 9 new cases. East Quogue had 3. A lot of areas didn't have any new cases. The Village here had 2 new cases. The Watermill didn't have any. But, you know, looking at where the cases are growing, so let's say over the course of the last week, the biggest percentage jump was actually in Watermill. Hampton Bays was 11% in terms of the number of people who've tested positive. The new cases, the growth over from a week ago is 11% increase. West Hampton, though, had a 15, almost 16%. So it's growing slightly faster in West Hampton even than in Hampton Bays. Some of it's deceiving because, you know, an area like Watermill starts out with a much smaller number. So, you know, one family, the whole household becomes affected. It's a big percentage. Whereas Hampton Bays, since you're starting out with such a large base, the same number of people looks like a much smaller percentage. So, you know, we're tracking the best we can some of these numbers. It does show, though, that COVID, particularly across New York State, is growing at a concerning rate. It was somewhat expected, and we've been expecting a post-Thanksgiving surge, just like we did post-Halloween. And I think we're going to start to see that reflected in the numbers. So we'll be lucky if we can sort of hold things where they are. Chances are they're going to go up slightly over the next few days. But thanks for all the help we're getting from Stony Brook, Southampton, and the county and the state to try to get some of these additional testing sites up and running. And you know, the governor, is putting that area, actually 2 areas of Southampton town, into this yellow zone up by Riverside and some areas of Northampton and Flanders, as well as the Hampton Bays, East Quogue, and portions of East Quogue and portions of Shinnecock Hills. I think if nothing else, it has helped raise the level of awareness and concern. So people maybe are taking a little bit more precautionary action. So I think it's positive in that. I'm hoping we don't move to orange zone, but we're doing our best. And Ryan's been doing a lot with public education, both in English and Spanish, and a lot of outreach and a lot of PPE distribution. As you mentioned, Lars Clemenson at the high school, at the school, Hampton Bays School, has been instrumental in both testing and distribution of PPE. So we have a great partnership here. And thank you, Ryan. Any other questions for Ryan?
Yeah, I had a question. Ryan, I've spoken to you about this before, but I've gotten no response from the county. The concerns that were raised by some advocacy groups that the rental moratorium has ended a few days ago, and the impacts of that, or the potential impacts of that on some of the local communities. And I drafted a letter and sent an email to the county and hadn't gotten any response. I wasn't able to bring it up at the last call, but has there been any discussion about that with?
So
with,
I
sorry,
have not spoken. I haven't spoken to Vanessa Baird Streeter yet on the topic. The state's rental moratorium or the state's moratorium on evictions may have just concluded, but the federal the CDC moratorium on evictions extends out to January 1, to my knowledge. So the fact that there is not action on it right yet may be because there's an overarching moratorium on it right now that they're utilizing. It would almost be kind of like if we were covered by, the county or the state's disaster declaration, and we didn't necessarily have to, do something ourselves because we fell within it. So I will get back to you with a better answer. I'll connect with either Vanessa or Amy and try and get a more solid answer, or even reach out to Teresa Santoro from the governor's office to see what the status is or the intentions are from the state of New York with regards to any kind of an extension on a eviction moratorium. But on a state level, but I think we're still covered by the federal moratorium at this point in time.
Ryan, that whether it's expired or expires in a few weeks could lead to a humanitarian crisis. So
Yeah.
I think it would be important to maybe touch base with the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office or the courts and see how many people have actually gone through the process of a court-ordered eviction. How many are looming out there? Are there a lot? Where will these people go? What provisions do we need to make for their safety? Now, normally, if it would lead to any sort of homelessness, we could certainly work with Department of Social Services, but they may have limited ability to deal with a looming crisis. Let's hope. The economy has been strong, but not for everyone. Not for everyone. There's a lot of people who are left out here. A lot of businesses that are still not even close to where they were. So it would be a good idea to get a sense of how many people are in trouble. So we know the scale of what we're looking at. And, if we can maybe work with the county on some emergency provisions, if it is a large situation.
I also received contact from a resident about a family member who is being evicted. And I actually spoke with Diana. She's looking into it some more. So perhaps, Ryan, you can touch base with her as well.
Yeah, and I'll check also with the OCA, Office of Court Administration, and as well as our own Justice Court, because our Justice Court does handle landlord tenant.
Yeah, because there is confusion when you talk to the community. There's a confusion about the CDC the extension, or what you're referring to, Ryan, as the federal control of evictions. But there's confusion as to whether or not that actually holds weight. And I think some people might be moving forward on the basis that, the state has right now that the date of January 1st has passed, come and gone, and that some people may be acting on evictions on that basis, not realizing, as you had stated, that there is an overriding mandate to protect that from happening, at least until the end of January. So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And you and I have had this conversation. you and I have had this conversation, Councilman. I think hopefully going forward, they figure out some way to balance this to provide the appropriate protections for both parties involved, both tenants that are, potentially being inappropriately evicted or that are struggling economically to cover their rent and stuff, and then are being evicted as a result of that. But it's an effect of the pandemic. But at the same time, we have also, I think, heard, many of us, the stories too within our municipality and others where people have come in and almost taken advantage of not almost, and have taken advantage of the situation and basically become squatters on property, not paying rent and using the stay on evictions as a mechanism to kind of live for free on a property in the meantime. So hopefully, as we move forward with any kind of legislation, it creates some sort of a mechanism by which proof must be demonstrated of a financial hardship in order to be eligible, or maybe there's even some sort of, compensation in an aid package going forward for a landlord that is being put into a position where a tenant has to stay in that location but isn't paying rent. I don't know what the final answer on that is, but there are two sides to this coin. And hopefully they'll both be factored in with future legislation that comes out, or any of the stays that are placed going forward.
Is there a stay right now on,
If I could just,
on,
did-
just, all right, go ahead, John.
I did include that, Ryan, in the letter to Vanessa. So, and that's what I was hoping that would get a response, or at least your office would have received some kind of response from that. So I appreciate that very much.
Was there an extension?
I'll
Ryan,
reach out.
was there an extension on the stay on foreclosures? Because, some of these landlords are dependent upon that rent money to pay the mortgage on the property, and could lose the property if they don't, if they don't pay that mortgage. I know at one point there was a stay, but I don't think that's still in effect.
Jim, do you, the supervisor, I'm not 100. Jim, do you have any insight on how the courts or the banks are handling? There's a pretty long timeline on foreclosures already,
Yeah.
post the financial disaster of several years back. But
Right. I'm not aware of any foreclosures proceeding at this point, but I can certainly find that out. But
Right.
I think there was, a deadline. We were approaching a deadline, but with everything happening again, it's probably going to be extended. But I can follow up on that.
Yeah.
Concern was the changing demographics and the impact that would have on COVID numbers.
Sure.
As far as bank mortgages, I know that the banks were requiring, when the stay was up, that they were requiring all back payment on that
Yeah.
day,
Yeah,
which is
that can't happen.
steep hill to climb.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. That's one of the biggest problems I've seen over the years is trying to get the banks to have appropriate workouts, with people to try to, and that seems to be one of the most frustrating things that all the homeowners have with the banks, trying to deal with the person and getting a response. A lot of times people can work, have the financial ability to do it at that time, but getting the consistent response from the banks, I think, impacts their ability to reorganize, restructure their mortgages a lot of times.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ryan? All right. Well, thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
All right. So let me see if I can find my agenda and see what we have next up. All right. All right. So 10:30, which is past now, it's follow-up discussion, Chapter 23, Ethics Code revisions with Steve Leventhal and Kathleen Murray. Are they both on the
Yep.
call?
There they are.
Good morning.
All right. Good morning. Hey, Steve, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
All right. Kathleen or Steve, whoever wants to kick this off.
Well, this is our second opportunity to discuss a proposed revision to the Code of Ethics that was developed by the Board of Ethics over many months. I have provided the town board with further annotations to the previous draft, hoping that that will assist the town board in understanding both what the sources of this draft were, what it is intended to achieve, and how it differs from the current code. I also have added a brilliant innovation. I've numbered the pages. So I hope that will assist as well. If there are any particular, we had a general overview last time. The last major revision to the town's Code of Ethics was occurred 15 years ago. There have been some minor changes since, but I think that it is appropriate to always think of the Code of Ethics as a work in progress. It's intended to achieve two major purposes. The first is to inspire public confidence in town government by ensuring not only the reality, but the appearance of integrity in government. And the second is to guide and protect the honest officers and employees of the town, help them to avoid unintended ethics violations by having a clear and comprehensive code, an ethics training program, educational materials, and a board of ethics that is available to render advisory opinions. So that is the general intent. We actually, in the town of Southampton, I have to say, I've been counsel to the Board of Ethics for quite a few years now, and it is a very well-functioning board and has provided ethics advice to many officers and employees of the town over the years. However, it's working with a code of ethics that, while it was a good effort in its day, can be, in the view of the Board of Ethics, improved. And I think that this proposal before the town board accomplishes that. Some of the ways in which it can be improved is by eliminating the many defined terms that, because the ethics program is primarily about preventing ethics violations before they occur, and accomplishing that by making sure that town officers and employees understand their obligations. Clarity is a very important element here. And the existing code has a couple of pages of defined terms that have the effect of reducing the clarity of the document by requiring that a person understand that when they're reading the text, that a particular word may not have its plain English meaning. We've tried to eliminate that problem. And throughout the code, we've made what we think are improvements. For example, the current code doesn't prohibit the unauthorized use of town resources, and we've added a provision to that effect. There are some provisions that we felt were unnecessary and didn't advance the purposes of the code, and we've streamlined those. So it's an overall comprehensive, fresh look at the Code of Ethics that doesn't cherry pick issues, but starts with a blank page and builds what we think is a modern, effective code of ethics that is equal to or better than any code of ethics of any other municipality in the state.
So Steve, I did have a question and I apologize. I meant to email those to you. The one question, and it's probably me, but I could not find. I'm trying to understand the political distribution issue in the ethics board, particularly the requirement that no member sitting on a board serve as an officer of a political committee. Does that apply specifically to Southampton? And I don't see it anywhere. I do know that we have some board members who serve on political committees that are not in Southampton, but are part of the state. And I'm just trying to understand. I can't find it in here. That is
Sure.
Southampton.
Sure. If you look at page 22 of the draft that I've distributed,
That's where I'm on.
okay? If you look at 23-23E, it says that no member of the Board of Ethics shall be an officer or member of a state, county, or town party committee as defined by the New York election law.
Now, does that mean officer as it was originally, or just absolutely cannot be a member of any committee?
Well, a party, it's member, not officer, and it's of a committee as defined by the election law. So those would be the formally constituted party committees pursuant to the rules of the particular party. It wouldn't be an informal committee. But
And this is specific to the Board of Ethics only.
this is specific to the Board of Ethics. Now, I will say that in response to, I think, a question that was sort of incorporated in the question, a sub-question that was sort of incorporated in the overall question, this is not a requirement of state law. Many of the provisions of the Town of Southampton Code are incorporated from Article 18 of the New York General Municipal Law, and they are mandatory. It's not that they're required to appear in your local code, but they apply in the Town of Southampton, whether or not they appear in your local code. So we've included all those provisions and then added provisions that are particular to the Town of Southampton. And this is one of those provisions that is not mandated by state law, but that accomplishes the goal of, we don't have that provision in there because we think a Board of Ethics member who belongs to a party committee is going to be corrupt or incompetent or act to achieve aims that are inconsistent with the interests of good government. We have that there so that residents of the town can take the message from the code that the Board of Ethics is nonpartisan. Many of the provisions of the town code, as I said a moment ago, are aimed not at ensuring the reality of integrity, not at ensuring that alone, but also ensuring the appearance of integrity in government. And a Board of Ethics that is perceived as motivated by political considerations will have no credibility and and therefore the mission of the ethics program will be undermined.
And I appreciate that and agree with that. I actually maybe misstated my question because, I see the Board of Ethics as having the highest standard, but then we have certain land use boards and things like that where that standard is not applied in those boards.
John, as you may be aware, we have a hearing on a resolution I proposed to modify this to actually prohibit officers in local committees from serving on the land use boards. So
Yeah.
that's something that we'll consider. Other towns have something similar, further reaching. even political committee members typically, like in East Hampton, can't serve. They'd have to decide. But certainly the leaders of the political party, to me, have to decide which hat they want to wear. If they're on a land use board, to eliminate any possible appearance of political types of influence. I think it makes sense, but that's something we can debate. But if we pass that law, then it would get incorporated into this town ethics code.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So I'm missing that part of it, and I think we do need to have that debate. What I'm unclear about, particularly in the land use boards, is where that line is drawn. So if we have people that are officers of political committees on our land use boards, what if we have people that are officers of state or county committees? Does that preclude them from serving as or being appointed to a land use board locally?
Well, again, it gets back to this law that I've introduced. So the current ethics code does not prohibit them at all. If my resolution passes, the way I've written it, it applies to local party leaders, not not officers on state or county or your other political committees. But the Southampton, whatever, Democrat, conservative, independents, Republican.
And this is a different resolution than what we're looking at here.
That is not part of what we're looking at. We struggled a little bit with this issue. Do we wait to have this conversation until after we've debated the suggestions I've made? And I think we felt like we've been, working on this broader ethics law reform for a while now, and to not muck it up with some of the changes, but discuss it as it's been proposed, and it's easy enough to modify it afterwards should the changes that I'm suggesting be incorporated.
And I appreciate that. I just want to be sure that what we do here with this legislation, this resolution relative to the ethics board, it has no unforeseen impact on the ability to pass your legislation.
There's another component to my legislation, and I don't know if Kathleen, is that part of the ethics code, the limitations on membership in the land use committees of particular parties?
Yes, there are 3 provisions that are introduced in your December 8th proposal.
Okay. Yeah, so right now you can't have a majority of any political party. To me, that is a ridiculous restriction. So most towns don't have anything like that. I'm proposing you can't have a supermajority, but you can have a simple majority. So it sort of keeps to the spirit of the law.
That gets back to my question: is when we're looking at this, we want to be sure that what we do here has no impact on what proposals may come up. I just want to be sure that they're separate and distinct.
Okay. Kathleen, you said there was a third piece. Do you remember what that was?
Yes, the membership is the membership criteria. So that is to say, to allow a majority or a quorum is first for the ethics board, and then also for any land use board being defined as the zoning board, the planning board, or the conservation board. And then the third piece that you have proposed is to say that no appointed board member can also serve on a local political party committee. So there were 3 amendments to the current ethics code that you've proposed as it exists today. And I think, Councilman Bouvier, to answer your question, if after debate those are adopted, then they can be incorporated into this new version that we're looking at here, if that's still the will of the board.
All right, thank you, Kathleen.
Can I just introduce another thought for the board's consideration? And that is, ultimately, if I were considering seeking to be a member of a town land use board. And I wanted to know what the qualifications for membership were. I would look at the section of the town code that establishes that particular board. I would not look to the code of ethics. So while I understand that you may want to temporarily insert that into the code of ethics, maybe you may wish to permanently insert that into the code of ethics. I don't mean to presume to say what you wish to do, but I'm suggesting that you may want to consider ultimately having those limitations or those qualifications of membership appear in the code sections that govern the particular boards.
Or at least a cross-reference of some sort.
And I have a question that kind of is along those same lines. I'm on page 5 and 6. And under your notes, Steve, one says that the qualifications of police officers should be governed by Chapter 19 of the Town Code. And then on the next page, it says attorneys governed by executive order or by the rules and regs of the law department. Shouldn't those be cross-referenced as well? Or is that standard procedure where somebody would know to go to those other rules and regulations at the same time as they're reading through this?
I don't think they would necessarily know to do that. The current code has those limitations in the code of ethics. And consistent with what I said about the land use boards, it seemed to me to make more sense to have those rules and restrictions in the places where those particular offices and positions of employment are established and governed. But if the board wishes to have them in both places, that's certainly something that is your prerogative to do.
I just say it was helpful to me to see that note in there to say, oh, there's somewhere else I need to look to see what I have to do and what I'm allowed to do. Thank you for your answer, though.
Steve, with the, we sometimes we run into issues like off-duty employment, police officers, and whether there are conflicts there. What is the sort of the controlling document? Is it the union contract, the employee handbook, or the ethics code, or something else?
Well, it could be any or all of those. The ethics code establishes certain rules. There may be bargained for rules also, and there may be personnel rules that govern. So really, unfortunately, you know, if you're a divorce lawyer, you know where to go to find the law. You go to the domestic relations law. If you're a tax lawyer, you go to the Internal Revenue Code. But if you're a municipal attorney, you may have to go to the general municipal law, the public officers law, the town law, and various other sources of authority. So unfortunately, it's a little bit, the authority can be found in a variety of places.
But ultimately, let's say the union contract allows an officer to work off duty doing security within the town for a private event.
Yes.
Clearly could be a conflict. Can the contract allow something that is contravened or in opposition basically of the ethics code, the state ethics code?
I don't believe that a collective bargaining agreement can contravene state law.
Okay.
However, if it is a creature solely of town law, that may be a different matter, depending upon what the rule is. For example, well, rather than give you an example, I think that's the general principle, that state law may not be contravened by contract.
Right. So I'd have to then look to state law whether that constituted a conflict.
But there's also here is basically, to use your hypothetical example, if the collective bargaining agreement allows outside secondary employment by police officers, that's fine. That secondary employment still must comply with the Code of Ethics provisions that prohibit conflicts of interest. So a town police officer who's considering secondary employment would be well advised to ask the Board of Ethics for an advisory opinion about whether a particular position of employment that he or she is considering would be incompatible with their official duties. And even a position of secondary employment that's not incompatible may nevertheless present a conflict of interest from time to time, in which case recusal would cure the conflict. But if the positions are entirely incompatible, the classic example of two incompatible positions being chief financial officer on the one hand and auditor on the other, you can see how those are incompatible positions. If the positions are incompatible, you can't occupy both positions. And there's case law going back, believe it or not, to 1874. A Court of Appeals decision from 1874 is the leading case in that area. So yeah, you can permit secondary employment. The town attorney's office may have a policy, I don't know whether it does or not, that permits outside practice by attorneys employed in the office. But that doesn't mean that that outside practice isn't still governed by the town code of ethics and the rules of professional conduct.
So there's a lot of gray areas in this one. You know, for instance, I know an officer can't work at a place licensed by the SLA. You know, as that's a law, but a
Right.
special event that has a on-site liquor license, I'm not sure that they can't work there. And what if they're not working security, but they're parking vehicles? So there's all these gray areas that make it complex. What I'm hoping to do with the PBA contract is, you know, make it so that, you know, the chief has to approve, but you know, off-duty employment to some extent, because right now he has no ability to disapprove that I can see, but only when there might have to be some due process in terms of establishing whether a real conflict exists. I haven't figured out how to do that yet.
Well, Supervisor, we want to encourage town employees to seek ethics advice from the Board of Ethics when they think they might have a conflict of interest, or when they want the protection of an opinion that blesses their contemplated outside activity. And when I spoke earlier about guiding and protecting town employees, that's how we guide and protect them. You know, a police, I remember when I was a member of the Nassau County Board of Ethics, a corrections officer working at the Nassau County Corrections Center asked for an advisory opinion from the Board of Ethics as to whether he or she could accept temporary secondary employment during holiday time, working as a security guard at a local department store. And, you know, I've conducted many ethics training programs with a colleague by the name of Mark Davies, a name that you may know. He recently retired as executive director of the New York City Conflict of Interest Board. And I've heard him say many times that during his time at that board, in the city ethics board, the most frequent customer for ethics advice from the Conflict of Interest Board was Mayor Bloomberg. Now, Mayor Bloomberg, needless to say, is a man wealthy enough to hire an army of lawyers to provide him with private confidential advice. And nevertheless, he went to the Board of Ethics of the City of New York to obtain advisory opinions because he understood that if he did so, if he had an opinion of the Board of Ethics blessing his conduct, that made him bulletproof. And we want to provide the same service to officers and employees of the town. We want to help them to avoid ethics violations on the one hand and avoid criticism when they engage in perfectly acceptable behavior on the other hand. So the higher the profile of the Board of Ethics, the more business comes their way in the form of requests for ethics advice. So that's the goal.
All right, any other questions on this? Not hearing any.
No.
All right, so Kathleen, what's the next step here? Are we gonna do a public hearing on the ethics code?
If the board is so inclined, you can either have, if you want to have another work session, or we can certainly have a public hearing. I don't know if you'd like to perhaps wait until after the debate on the December 8th proposal is.
I think so, because that hearing is coming up so quick. It's
Correct.
next week. And
Yes,
if that passes, then we should hold a public hearing on the global reform of the ethics code, including those changes.
correct. Or contemplate, as Steve suggested, that I put it in other sections of the town code. But yes, agreed.
Right. Okay, so yeah, so if the board's okay, why don't we wait till after next week and see what we're gonna do on those suggested reforms, and then follow up then with the hearing on the new ethics code, either with those changes or without. Okay? All right, I'm seeing nods, so I'll take
Very
that
good.
as
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
affirmation. Okay, thank you, Steve. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you all for your commitment to this project. It's really very much appreciated. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, let's do some updates. We heard from Ryan earlier. So it's a couple other things. I was out at North Sea Beach Colony the other day, taking a look at that erosion control project. Councilman Schiavone was out there as well. The dredging's wrapped up, as far as I understand, of the North Sea Harbor Inlet. They took out, I think, over 20,000 cubic yards, the county did, and deposited at private property on the west side of the inlet, rather than at Tower Point on the east side. And then the Erosion Control District had taxed themselves to move all but 5,000 yards of that down. So that's been very successful. That's been going to keep going on for another 3 to 4 weeks, where the payloader will be pushing that sand down. There's actually more sand stockpiled than they had anticipated, so I think they're coming back to us to see if we can free up some more of the money that they've taxed themselves for to push some more of that sand down. They had anticipated for the original project, I think 321,000, if I'm recalling that right. I think, or something like that, 300,000. I think that they approved for pushing the sand down around $131,000. So it's significantly less than the money that they have taxed themselves for. So it's about half of what they thought it would cost to get this much sand. So since the money's already been bonded or taxed for, it's in an account, and they want to spend a little bit more while they can, I think that's great. They'll make that request to us to get a little bit more of that sand. So, but we had a little bit of a press conference. Councilman Schiavone spoke, I spoke, Congressman Zeldin was there. He spoke, Legislator Fleming was there, she spoke. Nat Weineke spoke from the Property Owners Association, and Guido, if some of you may know Guido, he came a number of times to the board when they were asking for that erosion control district. And, it seems like a very successful project. There now is a beach there, where before the waves were just breaking against the bulkhead. There's actually a beach you can walk down, and every day it gets a little bit bigger. I've only been there at high tide, so at low tide, I'm sure it's significantly wider, but it's already to a point where you can walk all the way down to the inlet. So it seems like a really good project. Tommy John, did you want to add anything to that?
Sure. Yeah. In addition to the beach nourishment in front of the bulkheads of the North Sea Beach Colony, they also, of course, dredged out the inlet to North Sea Harbor. And that inlet needed dredging. And they dredged in the inlet as well as just outside the inlet, the ebb tide delta, as well as the flood tide delta. So it improves flow in and out of North Sea Harbor and makes it safer to take a boat in and out as well. One of the things that had developed on that beach there was the inlet was very close to the beach. It was a pretty steep drop off, and the current ran very strong there. So you had to be careful with little ones around that area. So now they've increased flow and made it more of a straight shot, if you will, out into Peconic Bays.
Yeah, it's safer to get in and out. That's
right. And this is a pocket marsh, and it's a contributor to the Peconic Bay estuary system, and that increased flow not only helps North Sea Harbor, but it also helps the estuary as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we have I guess 2 commercial oystermen.
Yeah, they were there.
And one of them spoke as well. He was there and decided to take the microphone. Did a great job, I thought. And we have the town marina there, Conscience Point, and Strong's Marina, and one other, private marina in that area. So it's important for navigation. But, it also, as Tommy John mentioned, flushing, but also public recreation, the use of that beach, public access, people to go fishing. You can drive down that beach now, which you couldn't before. There's habitat value for nesting shorebirds. And of course, if there's a storm, rather than have the waves smashing against the bulkhead, the impact of those waves is now absorbed by the beach. So there's a lot of benefits to this project. And I just want to thank all the partners, including Aram, who did a lot of work, Aram Tachunian, and the federal government through the Army Corps and U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and the state through the DEC and State Coastal Management, the town trustees who coordinated the permitting, and the conservation board, and property owners who taxed themselves to move that sand. It was a real multi-level partnership. From the federal government all the way down to a local property owners association. So, and a successful project. All right. Tommy John also joined me a couple days ago for the swearing in ceremony. Thank you for coming to that. That was a really nice event at the police department. The board unanimously supported 5 changes in the police department, 2 new officers and 3 promotions. It was nice to see actually the outgoing captain, Larry Shurick, was there. And we got to bring in the new captain, Captain Kiernan. We promoted to Lieutenant Kalb, and Sergeant Parker, Shirkan Parker from the Shinnecock Reservation, to that supervisory role as sergeant that I think is significant in the town of Southampton. It's the first person of color ever to be part of the police administration. Hopefully not the last. And we brought in two very qualified women as police officers. I got to meet them. One I had met years ago because she designed the Flanders flag. I think Officer Merker, Shannon Merker. I met her when she was, I guess, in high school, and she had done an art project and designed a flag for Flanders, the area that she grew up, and now is coming back as a police officer. So I think that's a great story. And one thing, one criticism of the department has been that it's been very male dominated through the years. So bringing in 2 female officers, I think, is significant. So it was a really nice ceremony. Police chief offered words about each of the individuals. I said a few words as well. A lot of family members. We did it. It's COVID-19, so we limited it to very small groups. So each promotion or new officer, we would take family members who were there for the prior group. They would have to leave, and we'd bring the new group in. So we kept it so we could all social distance. But it was really nice. Tommy John, did you want to add anything to that?
It was a nice ceremony. I'm proud of our police department. The new officers, I think it's worthy to note. One was part of our TCO program that we have, the traffic control officer. So she has worked with the police department in conjunction with the police department and comes to us with that experience. And the other comes to us from the state police as well. So, they're coming with training into the Southampton Town Police Department. And I think it's good to see that these promotions are made from within the department as well.
And then Tommy John, one more with you. We had a clerk meeting, Community Law Enforcement Review Committee. Tommy John, who's liaison to the police department, participates in those. We've been doing 1 or 2 a month. They've been very productive. This was big because we were talking about use of force policy, different types of holds, and ones we allow, ones we don't allow. And Chief Skrnicki did a great job in terms of giving a bit of their perspective on some of these procedures. And then Lieutenant Spencer also talked quite a bit about some of these procedures and some of the training that the police officers go through. Captain Kiernan was also on that call, and all of our representatives. We have a really big group there, and we had somebody sort of presenting the youth perspective at this. We're going to continue to reach out to young people to try to get some youth perspective, and we're going to, in fact, do a focus group with a number of young people and try to understand how they perceive police practices in the police department. Then we're going to do another focus group with police officers and sort of see the world through their eyes. So I think the work is going really well. It's a lot to cover, and we're spending an awful lot of time. The committee is very engaged in this work, and I'm looking forward to the findings, the final report. Deputy Town Attorney Scalera is sort of compiling all this stuff, and Connie Conway has been taking notes from each meeting. And we did do a survey online, and there's, I think, 400 people who responded. We're talking about doing another one and getting some additional information, because we're finding that is a very helpful tool for getting some input. Actually, over 500 people participated so far in the survey online. But we're looking at some of the other towns and the surveys that they are doing and the questions that they're asking. And we feel like there may be some additional information that would be helpful, that questions we could ask. Tommy John, did you want to add anything to that?
They're asking, the members of the committee are asking the right questions, and it certainly is a lively committee. Nobody's holding back anything. And so in addition to getting these important questions answered, and they'll be in the report that the board is going to see, I think it's equally as important for the committee to see the work that the police department does. A lot of the training and preparation, de-escalation tactics, they really want to result in fact, not having a confrontation. And that's something that's very difficult to measure. Something is not happening. But knowing what's behind it as far as the training and supervision of our officers is incredibly important. And that's something that the committee and myself included, we're seeing that from our police department.
Lastly, I want to cover a little bit related to COVID. About two weeks ago, we shifted not because we had to, but I thought it was prudent to try to reduce the co-working environments down to 50% with cooperation of the department heads. And I am looking to continue that. Most of the department heads have indicated that they are able to keep up with their workload. And it does keep people safer and hopefully will reduce the spread of COVID-19. As you know, a number of town employees have tested positive or with cohabitants that have tested positive. So in this surge period, it makes sense. So I may continue this through Christmas holiday and New Year's. But some departments have indicated that they can't go to 50%. So they're doing whatever reductions they can. Some are not able to do any reduction. So I've left this largely in the hands of the department heads to the greatest extent that they can without interrupting workflow, because I think it's important that we maintain town services. And on that note, we have instituted something new that I want to make sure that you guys are aware of and residents are aware of. So we started this QR code system. If you're familiar with QR codes, those are those crazy square boxes with all the little black dots in them. But you can, you take a picture with your phone and it opens up an application. So hopefully people are familiar with those QR codes. People can now make an appointment with, from their home with a building inspector. So rather than standing online to see the building inspector and putting themselves and others at risk, they just go to our website and they get the QR code, take a picture of it with their smartphone, and then they can make that appointment for a Zoom call. It's kind of like telemedicine, but it's building inspector. And you can share documents that way, which is nice, off of your computer, or you can, take a picture of those documents and share those pictures. So you can also, people have been queuing up in town hall in the lobby, and we can also, use those QR codes to just reserve a space and then wait in your car so that, when the next available counter person, next person is available, they can then text you that it's time for you to come in, so you don't have to wait in the lobby of town hall. So that should lessen the number of people in that lobby or outside standing in the cold. So I think that's important. I want to thank our IT department for setting that up. They've been doing just an incredible job with all the town workers, making sure they have all of the equipment that they need to work from home, those who are working from home. And I'm just, I'm constantly amazed by their abilities, the SOS system where people can, file complaints about different things or concerns about different things, to all of the online documents, ability to pay for things online. For most things, you don't need to come to town hall. Here we are having a meeting that we normally would have at town hall, but IT has been this tremendous backbone, giving us the ability to manage these services in a safer way. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out to those guys, to Paula, Pobat, and all the folks in IT who've been providing that support. And, hopefully we're doing a good job for the public by allowing them to do these things from home. And not only is that safer, but let's face it, it's less traffic too. So this is maybe something we really want to keep after COVID is over, which the sooner the better. But this idea of being able to not have to drive necessarily from West Hampton or from, Sag Harbor to come see a building inspector, but to be able to do that online is, I think, a welcome use of technology. All right. Anybody have any questions on any of that or want to add anything to that?
I do.
Just a quick, go ahead.
Me?
Go ahead, Julie.
Julie first.
So about the clerk meeting, I appreciate the updates and I'm glad that we're going to be getting a report. I was actually going to ask if we can get the minutes of the meeting, but when do you think that report is going to come out? Any idea?
January.
Oh, okay. All right.
There'll be public meetings on that report, so it'll be subject to change. But we are hoping by Tommy John, do you remember mid-January? Is that or early January?
I thought mid-January, but I just know January is our date, and we want to get it before the board, and then get the input from you all, and have it finalized before we send it up to the state. So we've been just talking January, not
It
exact
has
date.
to go to the state, I think, in April.
Yeah.
And we're required to have it to the state, or we can potentially lose some state funding. But anyway, that is the governor's request, that every law enforcement department file their report sometime in April, I think toward the end of April.
Okay, thank you.
And in terms of getting, we don't have minutes so much as notes, but if you talk to Connie Conway, she has those notes if you want to review anything.
Okay, thanks.
And Chief Skrnicki has been tremendous in terms of providing information about current practices within the department and policies and procedures. And a lot of what he presented, he had written out. So you might want to talk to him too. He can probably provide you with some of that documentation. It's been an educational experience. I think Tommy John would agree that we've actually learned things that we didn't know either about modern day policing and some of the challenges that are faced.
Mhm.
Okay, and to other updates, you guys have anything you want to share?
So real quick, I just wanted to confirm what you said about the QR code, especially for the building department. We get text messages and phone calls every day about the building department, whether it's good or bad, but got 3 in a row. The first day we put the QR code in effect and how great it was, and hoping that it does carry through in the future, because it makes it a lot easier to get your permits through and, to actually set an appointment at town hall. So the people were very happy with it. I hope that continues. On an update, Councilwoman Lofsted and I and Tom Neely and a crew of others are still working on the road end regulations. We think we have it down, so we're going to present it, hopefully, I think, Julie, next week, maybe.
Yep.
And, get that in. It seems like spring was so long ago, but it's right around the corner now. We don't want you signing executive orders for the rest of your life. So let's try to put this
Good, I appreciate
into
that.
effect. So hopefully we'll have that ready for next week for you. Thanks.
Yeah, I keep signing every 5 days. I do the restaurant one, because we keep extending the period for outdoor dining. And then the overall executive order now, I think I have running till January 15th. You probably have seen that. We could suspend it if things change. Right now things are not getting better, they're getting worse, but that's the executive order that closes certain things like the senior centers and does a lot of the COVID related changes. I can't believe we've been in a state of emergency for this long. I don't remember when it started anymore, whether it was February or March, but it was I never would have ever foresaw a situation that would put the town in a state of emergency for
March 8th,
the entire most of the year.
New York State declared a state of emergency on March 8th, 2020.
It's just unbelievable. We're living through a pandemic. One in 100 year type of pandemic. We want to make sure we
yesterday,
live through it.
nationwide, we recorded the highest number of COVID cases reported and the highest number of deaths yesterday, December 2nd.
So it's so sad too, as we get so close to that vaccine, we can see it. It's just a few months away. And with these losses are even more tragic because of that, you know? So just hang in there, everybody. Do your social distancing, your mask wearing. Don't go out if you don't have to. Stay home. And we're helping people do that.
I do have an update.
Yeah, go ahead.
And a more local land use topic. We're looking into and working on having a member of our planning department sit with the zoning board during the zoning board meetings. Most of our other meetings, conservation board, planning board, there's someone from the town, planning, that sits with these boards, and we're looking to have that up and running by the new year with the zoning board. And
John, can you repeat that? Who would be
Sure.
sitting in the zoning board? A member of which?
Planning.
Not the
And
planning
this is
board.
not
but-
a planning board person, but someone from the town, from planning. So we would have an attorney, Ms. Garvin, as well as someone from planning as a resource for the board members with specific applications if they have
Absolutely. Good
questions about code, and and they're all very knowledgeable, but comp plans and hamlet plans and things like that. So this would be an additional resource for those members
That's
of the
great.
zoning
I
board
know
to make.
you served on the zoning board.
I did.
And you served on a zoning board elsewhere too. I did as well. And I could tell you when I was on the East Hampton Town Zoning Board, the planning department presented on every application,
Mhm.
every application. And it's amazing that they're not even in the room. So I think that's a good change. I think it would be very, very important that the perspective of the planning department is brought into the zoning board application.
They're still going to vote the way they vote, and it's just, like I said, another resource for them to use to make the best decision possible.
Exactly.
They're important decisions on the zoning board, as all of our land use board decisions are.
In East Hampton, the planning board typically would make a recommendation on zoning board application.
And that occurs here as well, as you know. And the planning board would make recommendations to the zoning board about specific applications.
Planning
so
department?
Planning. Well, there's a planning board referral
Right.
process as well, but not every application gets that. And most of the applications are, de minimis, where there probably won't be much input, but it's good to have a person there, for the questions to be answered, from the point of view from the town planning perspective and long range planning as well.
Any other updates?
Not at this time.
All right. Let me go back to our agenda. All right. So the next would be executive session. We have acquisitions to discuss, litigation to discuss. I don't know. Is there any personnel matters?
No, I think Sandra, I saw yesterday, she said she had nothing to discuss.
All right, well, I may have a personnel matter, so why don't we include that possibly as a topic? And I'll make a motion to adjourn our work session and go into executive session for those items.
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Lofstad. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. That's the